The Human Experiment, Origins of Evolution, Chapter 1, Part 2. Humans share a common ancestry with apes. Many people are uncomfortable with the idea that we humans are part of the animal kingdom. Yet many cultures around the world recognize the similarities between humans and non-human primates. This relationship is even alluded to in some creation stories, including the Mayan account mentioned in Chapter 2. Such observations of similarity are correct. Darwin correctly predicted our close biological relationship with the apes more than a century ago. In fact, Morris Goodman, 1999, researcher at Wayne State University, reports that humans and chimpanzees have a 95% of their DNA sequence and 99% of coding DNA sequences in common. Now, this doesn't mean humans descended from chimpanzees, but it does mean that both humans and modern chimps evolved from a common prehistoric ancestor, probably about 6 to 10 million years ago. There are a number of human and pre-human ancestors revealed by fossil record, and there are transitional forms, that is, fossils that exhibit both human-like and ape-like characteristics. Although new fossils are being discovered all the time, at present, it is thought that our common ancestor with apes is one of the species predating Ardipithecus. Fossil evidence that supports this conclusion will be presented and discussed in chapters 6 through 9. Number 3, there is only one human race, Le Tour de France. One of my colleagues in sociology likes to say the only human race is the Boston Marathon. I refer to the Tour de France because I'm a serious cyclist and a cycling fan. But the point is the same. There are no biological races within the human species. Why would we make such a claim? After all, everybody knows there are people of different races, right? I mean, we've grown up learning to judge people and treat people differently based on their race. So those groupings must be biologically real, right? Wrong. Certainly, there are groupings that most people refer to as races, but they are not valid biological groupings. Rather, they are classifications. Most people do not reflect the actual distribution of genetic variability within the species. In fact, the more we learn about genetics and the human genome, the clearer is that our racial classification fails to reflect the real patterns of genetic variation. There is so much more to individuals than their skin color and other traits varied independently of skin color. My brother is married to a Chinese woman, and they have 3 fine sons. My nephews have grown up in Hong Kong, Beijing, Tokyo, and California, and they've had dubious honor of being discriminated against on 2 continents because they are Amerasian. My brother has sometimes expressed his anger at the way his sons have been treated, and when he learned that anthropologists generally don't accept the validity of biological races, he wondered why anthropologists aren't telling anyone about this. I responded that some anthropologists have been making the case against race for more than 70 years. At least since Ashley Montague's book, Man's Most Dangerous Myth, The Fallacy of Race. But apparently most people don't want to hear it. Perhaps skin color is too convenient a way to discriminate against others. The bad news is we have used race as an excuse to mistreat each other. The good news is there is no valid biological basis for continuing to do so. In Chapter 5, we will consider several kinds of evidence that suggests race is not valid biological concept for humans, as well as why race is not useful for understanding human variability. I hope readers will understand why most anthropologists conclude that there is no biological basis for discrimination against any group of humans as defined by our misguided racial classification. There are no biological races, just many culturally defined ethnicities that have evolved in the context of our human experiment. Number 4, the Neolithic Revolution was the most important development in human prehistory. The Neolithic period is the prehistoric era during which human populations invented food production, that is, they switched from being hunter-gatherers dependent on wild plant and animal foods to producing their own food through plant and animal domestication. This shift is considered by many researchers to be the most important change humans ever made because it seems to be the only time that a species has changed to adapt to a completely new ecological niche without undergoing speciation. Instead, humans altered the natural environment to suit the needs of their growing populations. The ability to produce food and store the surplus was the basis for the development of nearly all of the complex societies in the world and the basis for cultural development such as market economies, political hierarchies, craft specialization, trade, warfare, and most other aspects of recent historical and modern society. In fact, the demographic and ecological consequences of the Neolithic revolution in food production are still being felt by our world today. Contemporary challenges such as population growth, poverty, war, and global warming will be discussed in this next chapter in 14. The discipline of anthropology. I know of no department of natural sciences more likely to reward a person who goes into it more thoroughly than anthropology. There is an immense deal to be done within the science, pure and simple, and it is one of those branches of inquiry which brings one into contact with great problems of humanity in every direction. Thomas H. Huxley. Anthropology is the scientific study of humanity. It is arguably the broadest and most comprehensive of the human sciences, encompassing all aspects of human biology and culture. Although individual researchers focus on one or more or a couple of areas of specialization, as is the case in other disciplines, anthropologists as a group study every aspect of human existence in all geographical regions and at all time periods, past and present. Ashmore and Scherer. In fact, all anthropologists would agree that one of the key defining traits of anthropology that distinguishes it from other disciplines is our commitment to a global, comparative, holistic approach. If we hope to understand the human condition in the broad sense, it is necessary to look beyond our own personal experiences, beyond our community or ethnic group, and even beyond our own culture and nation. Therefore, anthropology draws upon cross-cultural comparisons of groups from all over the world. When making observations about proposing explanations for the human conditions, all cultures have an intrinsic value in teaching us about the range of behaviors that are human and the various conditions under which those behaviors are developed. This idea that one culture is not better than another is called cultural relativism. Our interest is not in judging other peoples, but in understanding them, and thereby adding to an even more comprehensive picture of what it means to be human. Yet the human experience is vast and complex. No one can be an expert in every aspect of humanity or every region or period of interest to researchers. Thus, anthropological training and research today involves the development and use of specialized knowledge and skills focused on one or a few areas of technical and geographical specialization. The field of anthropology is commonly divided into 4 subdisciplines, each of which contains numbers of areas for specialization. Biological anthropology deals with the biological aspects of human behavior and the biological evolution of humans and related species. Biological anthropologists work on a variety of topics that will be discussed in this book, including primatology, primate and human anatomy, paleoanthropology, genetics, and human variation. Cultural anthropology studies modern societies to identify and understand the sets of ideas that organize and influence those societies or cultures. Culture is one of the defining concepts that unite discipline of anthropology. Culture can be thought of as the complete set of shared ideas, norms, and rules for behavior learned by someone as a member of a society. In this sense, culture is the intellectual, social, spiritual, political, and philosophical content of a society's collective knowledge. In another sense, cultural knowledge is the way that humans adapt to our surroundings. It is the set of behaviors that allow a society or culture to interact with the environment and other groups of people with whom we share our part of the world. Cultural anthropologists live with and study living peoples in an effort to understand the details of human cultural behavior, both within and between groups. Archeology, as it is practiced by many researchers today, can be considered to be the cultural anthropology of past human groups. Archaeologists cannot observe historic or prehistoric human behavior directly, so they rely on making inferences about the past from the material remains of human behavior, such as artifacts, features such as campfires, houses, roadways, etc., and the spatial and temporal relationships among them. Using these materials traces, archaeologists attempt to reconstruct and explain past cultural behavior using methods and reasoning similar to those used by forensic scientists. Indeed, forensic science is an outgrowth of archaeology. Linguistic anthropology involves the study of human language, including its origin, the historical relationship among different languages, language structure, symbolism, and the ways that language influence human perceptions and communication about the world around us. Anthropology is a holistic in another way. Not only do we need to examine all sorts of societies in all kinds of settings, but we also need to study all aspects of the societies we encounter. We accept the view that all aspects of human behavior are connected and that traits or behaviors that we might characterize as anatomical, biological, linguistic, economic, dietary, religious, or political, for example, are all interconnected. Each aspect of human behavior is connected to and influenced by other parts. The past is connected to the present, and our present day condition is a product of that connection. Changes in one aspect of human biology or cultural behavior have implications for other parts of our behavior because everything is connected. The perspective that humanity is a product of the interaction between our biological or genetic inheritance and our cultural heritage is called biocultural approach. Thus, it might be argued that biological evolution explains human origins, but biocultural evolution explains our development as a species. In a recent survey, Learning Objectives, in a recent national survey of the university professors, 96% of the respondents identified critical thinking skills as the single most important thing that students should learn during their undergraduate education. The survey results are pretty remarkable, especially when one knows that professors disagree about many things and that getting all or most of them on the same page can be as challenging as herding cats. Yet professors largely agree that it is more important for students to learn how to think rather than focusing on the details of what to think. Facts as we know them today will be revised as future research yields new discoveries. New analytical techniques will develop in the future. New technologies will lead to new areas of research that have not yet been developed to a large extent. We are preparing students to address questions that haven't been asked, fill job openings that don't yet exist, and generate policy solutions for problems that haven't been defined. How can students hope to do this if they spend all their time memorizing the details of things as we presently know them? Well, they can't. However, by using critical thinking skills, students should be able to examine and evaluate any data, claims, and arguments they encounter in the future. In the current anti-intellectual climate of fake news and so-called alternate facts, it is often challenging to identify what is really known and what is not. Unfortunately, many students do not understand or use critical thinking skills, not even those who believe they do. A few semesters ago, I asked students in an introductory anthropology class to discuss their ideas about critical thinking. The results were cause for some concern. Many students thought they and their fellow students were using critical thinking all the time, but they didn't really know what critical thinking means. Some thought it simply means thinking apparently, as opposed to not thinking at all. Others said it was thinking about a topic rather than taking notes. Some believed that it refers to making decisions quickly in a critical situation, such as in a medical emergency. Many students believe critical thinking is having an open mind or thinking outside of the box. In other words, many students conceive of critical thinking as a sort of postmodern openness to various ideas. Very few mentioned anything about data evaluation, logic, reasoning, decision-making, or problem-solving, all of which are components of critical thinking. At the most basic level, critical thinking is the knowledge and use of methods of logic, inquiry, and reasoning applied to the problems we encounter in life. The methods allow one to evaluate claims and make warranted decisions about whether or not to accept them. Critical thinking is all about decision making, about rejecting false claims and incorrect explanations. I recognize that many students are challenged by some of the ideas presented in this book, especially those ideas that may seem to conflict with firmly held political views or religious beliefs. In fact, students who encounter scientific findings that challenge their views sometimes allege that scientists are politically motivated or anti-religious. Such is generally not the case. For one thing, the scientific method is purposely intended to weed out explanations that are ineffective because they are biased. Second, religious beliefs are beyond the pure view of science. Third, and perhaps most importantly, scientists are generally not driven by a desire for fortune and glory, such as one might attribute to Indiana Jones. Instead, most scientists really do what they do simply because they are curious about the world. The attraction of science is what physicist Richard Feynman has called the pleasure of finding things out. I hope students will embrace the spirit of discovery and accompany researchers as we try to find out some things about the human condition. If students are not regularly challenged by the content of their courses, they are probably not getting their money's worth from college. Nevertheless, it is certainly not the intent of this book to suggest what anyone's religious beliefs or political views should or should not be. The scientific knowledge about our past is presented as it is currently understood. I do not expect students to believe the textbook, but I do hope that you will develop an understanding of the interpretations and explanations presented. I hope you too will be able to express why scientists hold the views they do, and that you will come to respect the intellectual process that led to their conclusions. This book is an introduction to the evidence for biological and cultural changes in humans and our ancestors, as well as changes in the environments to which they have adapted. There are so many lines of inquiry and so many details of evidence that bear on these general issues that some textbooks on human evolution seems to get bogged down in presentation, an overwhelming number of details, challenging students to succeed at memorization. I choose not to structure this book in that way for two main reasons. First, new fossils and archaeologicals and finds are being discovered so often that some of the specific facts one might memorize today will be superseded by new discoveries in a few years. Second, I don't want students to merely remember a list of facts from the textbooks. I hope readers will understand why scientists have drawn their conclusion they have. In other words, I want you to understand the connection between scientific evidence and warranted explanations for that evidence. Vocabulary, names, dates, and other such details are important only to the extent that they relate to an understanding of the larger issues, how we know the things about the human past and the broad patterns of change leading to modern humanity. It is my hope that students will gain enough understanding of biological anthropology and archaeology to answer the questions posed in the first paragraph of this chapter. In other words, you should be able to discuss the broad outlines of human development from our separation from other primates to our expansion across the globe, the nature of our hunter-gatherer roots, and the invention of agriculture and civilizations. There are some features of the book that will hopefully help students meet these learning objectives. Through the textbook, you will encounter color-coded words and phrases. Statements that are printed in green are understood to be true, while those highlighted in red are considered to be incorrect. Words highlighted in blue are important concepts or vocabulary terms, the latter of which may be found in the glossary. Quick link codes provided at various places throughout the book provide access to videos and websites containing supplementary materials that help illustrate important concepts. Throughout the book, examples will be used that illustrate how earlier discoveries were superseded by later ones, and how previous explanations or understandings were replaced by more recent ones as our understanding of the past has improved. We will explore many highlights of human evolutionary change, and I hope you learn some interesting and surprising things. I also hope that overall approach to the information about our human experiment will help the reader become more discerning consumer of the ideas and claims in other areas of life. Even a book on human evolution with its necessary facts on the prehistoric past is more relevant to our present circumstance than one might first imagine. We will all benefit if more people develop some understanding about the scientific knowledge that could help inform public policy relating to evolution, education, race, global warming, public health, sustainable development, food safety, and other contemporary issues. About the title, I'm sure that some of you are wondering why the evolution of humanity is referred to as the human experiment. The textbook title is intended to emphasize the scientific understanding that appearance of our species on the planet was not inevitable. Humans have no inherent right to exist, and we have no guarantee of our long-term survival. Although scientists would not say that evolution is random, the appearance and disappearance of particular species has not occurred in a way that would seem to indicate the existence